Mr. True Nightmares, Episode 33. There are not many people in our village, but every single person here is kind-hearted. This situation didn't last long. It started with a humming in the evening. At first we thought it was due to some work, but the sound never went away, as if it was our curse. We couldn't understand where it was coming from. It had been 3 weeks since the humming started. People in the village started to behave strangely. Murders and suicides started in the village. I wasn't feeling well either. Our village had become very bad. The people I saw as good turned into a murderer or a madman in a day. I even called the gender armory, and the people who came tried to find the source of the sound, but they couldn't find it. This humming was a very strange, high-pitched sound that kept going on and on, making us do things we couldn't do. Thank God my wife and children were fine, but that didn't last long. At 3 o'clock in the evening, I heard a screaming sound. It was coming from my children's room. It was my wife's voice. She was crying. I ran to the room. What I saw, my God! My wife had a bloody knife in her hand. The throat of my little daughter in swaddling, and my 3-year-old son in bed was cut, and the floor was a bloodbath. Before I could say, "What did you do?" my wife, holding a knife, started walking towards me. I tried to get away from her so as not to hurt her, but she was walking towards me, laughing in a frightening way. I pointed the rifle hanging on the wall at her and said, "Please stop," but she kept coming, and I pressed the trigger. My wife was thrown to the ground by the impact of the bullet. She was still laughing while she died. I called the end armory with difficulty, and when I told them where we were, they hung up on me without saying anything. The fame of the village had spread everywhere. No one even wanted to set foot here. I tried to stay in the house until I ran out of food, but I ran out of provisions. I had nothing to do. I had to go out and get away from this village. I left the house, and it was very quiet outside. I started to walk towards the exit of the village, and the horrible, crazy people and the houses were looking at me strangely from their windows. There was a man with an axe passing by me with a grunting grunt. Out of nowhere, he broke the door of a house and killed the woman who was looking at me inside. I started to walk even faster, but I realized that crazy people like this man were everywhere outside, and it was impossible for me to leave this village. I walked back to my house without making a sound. I was thinking hard that I should take the provisions from the dead people's houses. That's the only way I could feed myself that night. What had happened to my wife and children? I couldn't live like this. I had to find the source of this sound and end it. I would have done something for my children and my wife. That day I decided to hide from the crazy people in the village and collect the provisions in the houses, but I had to be quiet and take every step carefully. As I passed among my crazy neighbors, I held my breath and did not look away. I was in fear of being attacked at any moment. In one of the houses, I heard the shrill humming that it caused the silent apocalypse to begin. In the previous days, the sound was getting stronger and stronger this time. I had to find the source of the sound and stop it, but I knew that the villagers, under the influence of this humming, could attack at any moment. For several days, I walked around the village, trying to determine where the humming was coming from, but each time, when I found the source, I was threatened by a crazy villager passing by. These people, who had lost their mental health, did not hesitate to harm those around them. As I searched for the source of the howl, I tried to avoid the attacks of the insane villagers around me, but each time I was being chased by villagers who had gone mad. Under the influence influence of the strange howl, driving everyone in the village into a kind of madness, and it was becoming horrible that I followed the high-pitched howl coming from one of the houses in the village. The sound led me to the village square. In the square, there were mad villagers scattered around. Some were wandering around with guns in their hands. Some were screaming and attacking those around them. When I finally found the source of the sound, there was a circle with strange symbols in the center. The insane villagers standing in the circle were holding their hands over the symbol and perform a kind of ritual. The humming was the result of this strange ritual, and the madness of the villagers had increased. Under the influence of this ritual, the mad villagers around the symbols noticed me. Suddenly they started walking towards me. I tried to escape, but I was trapped in a crowd. The situation was further complicated by the villagers, who were driven mad by the sound and by my efforts to stop the ritual. Then someone put something in the center of the symbol. There was a moment of silence. Then the humming grew louder one by one. The crazed villagers began to fall to the ground, but the humming grew louder and louder, and the sky darkened terribly. A dark being appeared in the sky, filled with a terrible energy that surrounded the village. This being was taking the lives of the insane villagers, leaving a dark being in its place. Each villager died a horrible death. I tried to run away, but the dark being started coming towards me. Its eyes glowed with red light and sucked the life out of the village. With a horrible scream, I, too, began to disappear under the influence of the entity. In the end, absorbed by the dark entity, I shared the same dark fate as the insane villagers in the village.